The movie begins in a truly bizarre way. In the middle of a lifeless desert, we see only two people, a ruthless man and a young child who has been forced to serve him like a slave. Their water supply has completely run dry, yet the exhausted child continues following every order without daring to question his master. As they struggle across the endless sand, they suddenly spot a mysterious patch of red stretching across the desert. The man is overwhelmed with excitement and declares that they've almost reached their destination. But before they can move any further, they need a special map, and that map is sealed inside a glass bottle. The man desperately tries everything he can to open the bottle. He twists it, pulls at it, and even smashes it against the sand over and over again. But the soft desert sand absorbs every impact, leaving the bottle completely unharmed. Hoping to help, the child begins digging through the sand, searching for a stone that could break the glass. Unfortunately, he finds nothing. That's when the man comes up with a horrifying idea. He places the bottle on top of the child's head, orders him to stand still and face the other direction, then raises his hand, preparing to smash the bottle using the child's skull as support. Just before the bottle comes crashing down, the scene suddenly cuts away. Only then do we realize that everything we've witnessed so far is actually part of a story being written by an author. His manuscript abruptly ends at that exact moment because he has stopped writing. As silence fills the house, he suddenly hears footsteps echoing from upstairs. Curious but uneasy, he grabs a flashlight and slowly climbs the stairs. For a brief second, the beam of light reveals the shadow of a woman standing in the darkness, but the moment he shines the flashlight directly at her, the shadow vanishes without a trace. Shaken by what he just witnessed, the writer begins feeling an overwhelming sense of fear. Trying to distract himself, he heads into the garden where he discovers an old wooden box buried among his late parents' belongings. When he opens it, he finds his father's gun, several brochures for a mysterious hotel, family photographs, and a collection of old letters. As he reads through the letters, he uncovers something strange. His parents had an unusual obsession with that hotel. No matter what, they always chose to stay there, and every single visit, they booked the very same room, the honeymoon suite. Determined to uncover the truth behind his parents' past, Om decides to visit the very same hotel they love so much. But the moment he arrives, he notices something unusual. The entire hotel is almost deserted, with barely any guests around. Meanwhile, the hotel owner is entertaining two children by telling them a creepy local legend. According to the story, deep within the nearby forest lives a terrifying witch. Instead of killing people who lose their way, she captures them, especially children. She chains them up, tortures them, and eventually drags them straight into hell. Naturally, the horrifying tale leaves both children terrified. Sensing their fear, Om steps in and calmly tells them not to listen to scary stories from strangers before sending them away. While checking into the hotel, the manager suddenly recognizes Om as a famous writer. Excited, he explains that his son is a huge fan and politely asks if Om would sign one of his books. Surprisingly, Om refuses without giving any explanation. His cold response immediately hints that he's not exactly the friendly or social type. Without saying another word, he simply takes his room key and follows the hotel attendant upstairs. Inside the room, Om notices an old photograph of his mother standing beside a massive tree. Curious, he asks the attendant if she knows where the tree is located. She immediately recognizes it and tells him exactly where to find it. After leaving his luggage behind, Om heads straight into the forest toward that enormous tree. It turns out this place held a special meaning for both of his parents. It was their favorite spot, and after his mother's death, Om decided to fulfill her final wish by bringing her ashes here. Standing before the ancient tree, he gently places the ashes inside a hollow opening in its trunk, hoping her soul will finally find peace. Afterward, Om continues wandering through the forest, where he unexpectedly meets a homeless young woman named Cherry. She carries an old milk bottle filled with powdered magical mushrooms, a powerful hallucinogenic substance. As they spend time together, Cherry begins sharing strange stories about the forest and its mysterious history, leaving Om even more curious about the secrets hidden within these woods. The movie then cuts back to the opening desert sequence. This time we see what actually happens. At the last moment, the man cannot bring himself to smash the bottle against the child's head. Pity stops him from committing such a cruel act. But because the bottle remains unbroken, they never obtain the map and fail to reach their destination. With no water and no food left, the two continue wandering through the endless desert, slowly realizing that dying from thirst is far more painful than they ever imagined. The reason we were shown that strange desert story now becomes clear. Ohm has been sitting inside the hotel, writing different endings for his latest story. After finishing one version, he hands the manuscript over to Fu and asks for her opinion. Fu finds the ending rather unusual and honestly tells him that it doesn't feel right. Instead of getting offended, Ohm simply listens, and the conversation reveals that the two have already developed a comfortable bond. As they continue talking, Fu gently asks about Ohm's parents. Ohm quietly shows her a photograph of his mother and begins revealing his painful past. He explains that when he was just a child, his mother was murdered. Since the killer was still a minor, he escaped with little punishment. The tragedy shattered his family, and before long, his father also passed away from the grief and shock. Ohm admits that the only reason he came to this hotel is because it was his parents' favorite place. He even wanted to stay in the honeymoon suite, the room they always chose whenever they visited. However, Fu tells him that the honeymoon suite has been closed for a long time. Confused, Ohm asks why. That's when Fu reveals something disturbing. According to the hotel's owner, the room is cursed because it is connected to the same mysterious witch from the legend that was told to the children earlier. Surprised, Ohm asks if those stories are actually true. Without hesitation, Fu says yes. To convince him, she shows him an old book filled with information about the witch. The book not only describes her terrifying history, but also explains how people can protect themselves. It claims that if the witch ever starts chasing someone, the only way to survive is to stand inside a circle marked with white powder. As long as a person remains inside that circle, the witch supposedly cannot harm them. Just then, another hotel attendant joins the conversation and claims that he has personally seen the witch with his own eyes. Ohm, being the skeptic that he is, immediately dismisses the story as complete nonsense. The attendant then changes the subject and reveals that he's also an aspiring writer. Hoping to impress Ohm, he asks him to read one of his scripts. But Ohm has absolutely no interest. Instead of responding politely, he becomes irritated by the man's persistence. In a moment of frustration, he accidentally presses the hot spoon from his cup against the attendant's hand. Even then, the man doesn't react with anger, creating yet another awkward moment that makes Ohm seem even more difficult to understand. The hotel staff know they aren't supposed to upset a guest, so neither of them says anything about Ohm's rude behavior. Instead, they quietly return to their work. While cleaning the floor, Fu discovers something that immediately catches her attention: a photograph of Ohm's mother along with his old tape recorder. Realizing how important these belongings must be, she asks the other attendant to help her return them to Ohm. When they arrive outside his room, they notice something isn't right. The door is locked, and despite knocking repeatedly, there's no response from inside. Fu grows increasingly worried and tells the attendant to unlock the room. At first, he refuses, reminding her that entering a guest's room without permission is strictly against hotel policy. But Fu insists that something is wrong, and eventually, he gives in. The moment they force the door open, they're met with a horrifying sight. Ohm has attempted to take his own life and is hanging unconscious inside the room. Without wasting a second, they rush in, cut him down, and desperately try to save him before calling for emergency help. The scene suddenly shifts to a terrifying vision. Ohm finds himself inside the very same hotel, but everything is now swallowed by darkness. The once peaceful building feels abandoned, cursed, and lifeless. As he looks around, he notices his mother standing behind him, except she no longer looks kind or gentle. Her face is filled with rage, and the horrifying sight leaves him frozen in fear. Ohm suddenly wakes up, only to realize it was all part of a nightmare. He isn't in the hotel at all, he's lying in a hospital bed. Several weeks have passed, and he has been in a coma ever since his suicide attempt. The doctors explain that he survived only because Fu found him in time and got him to the hospital before it was too late. After making a full recovery, Ohm is finally discharged. Once he leaves the hospital, Ohm decides to return to the hotel. partly to collect the belongings he left behind, but more importantly, to personally thank Fu for saving his life. However, when he arrives, he finds the hotel completely closed. The manager explains that it's a seasonal hotel that only operates during the honeymoon season. As Ohm asks to meet Fu, the manager's expression suddenly changes. He quietly reveals that Fu has been missing for several weeks. The last time anyone saw her was during a Halloween party, and since that night, she has completely vanished without a trace. To prove he's telling the truth, the manager hands Ohm an old newspaper containing the missing person report. Ohm is left stunned. He can't believe that the woman who saved his life simply disappeared without any explanation. Confused and disturbed, he asks how something like that could happen. The manager can only shake his head and says the police have been investigating ever since, but so far, they haven't found a single clue. While searching for answers, Ohm learns something interesting about Cherry. The locals believe he has a dark past. According to rumors, after his wife died, he disappeared for nearly 10 years before suddenly returning to the area. Even more suspicious, several people claim that the last person seen talking to Fu before her disappearance was Cherry himself. Ohm immediately questions everyone about the honeymoon suite. After all, Fu had once told him she wanted to visit that room. But the moment the manager hears those words, his expression changes completely. He firmly warns Ohm never to go near the honeymoon suite. According to him, the room is extremely dangerous and has remained sealed for years. He even orders Ohm to leave the hotel immediately, refusing to discuss it any further before throwing him out. With nowhere else to turn, Ohm goes to meet Cherry. While looking through Cherry's belongings, he discovers Fu's book. Seeing it instantly makes Ohm suspicious. Just like everyone else, he begins wondering if Cherry murdered Fu. After all, people already believe he killed his own wife. Cherry calmly denies the accusation. He tells Ohm that just because people think he killed his wife doesn't mean he also harmed Fu. In fact, he insists that Fu was his friend and he would never have done anything to hurt her. As for his wife, Cherry explains that she had been suffering from an unbearable illness. According to him, he didn't murder her. He simply ended her suffering when she could no longer endure the pain. Still desperate to find Fu, Ohm asks where she could have gone. Cherry doesn't have a direct answer, but he points to the book in his possession and explains that Fu personally gave it to him. He believes she isn't simply missing, she's dead. Cherry then reveals something even stranger. Every night, he secretly sneaks into the abandoned hotel to steal medicine. During one of those visits, he heard the old honeymoon suite bell ringing. That bell is unique because it can only be rung from inside the honeymoon suite itself. Curious, he turned around, and for a brief moment, he saw what looked like Fu's spirit pointing directly toward the room. Since then, he's been convinced that whatever happened to her is connected to the honeymoon suite. When Ohm asks how they're supposed to get inside such a heavily restricted room, Cherry confidently tells him not to worry. He already has a way in. So the two decide to wait until nightfall before making their move. As they sit together waiting for darkness, Cherry opens up about his wife once again. He says that after her death, her spirit appeared before him, not to seek revenge, but to thank him. According to Cherry, she told him that by ending her unbearable suffering, he had finally set her free. Night finally falls, and Cherry puts his plan into action. Using a stolen set of hotel keys, he secretly unlocks the abandoned building and slips inside with Ohm. Once they're in, the two split up to search the hotel. Ohm heads deeper inside to investigate on his own, while Cherry stays behind to keep watch. Unfortunately, someone spots Cherry sneaking into the hotel. The manager immediately grabs him, convinced that Cherry is responsible for Fu's disappearance. Without wasting any time, he contacts the police, reporting that he has finally caught the prime suspect. Meanwhile, Ohm continues exploring the silent hotel alone. As he walks through the dark corridors, he suddenly hears the old honeymoon suite bell ringing. Remembering everything Cherry had told him, Ohm cautiously follows the sound and steps inside the long-abandoned honeymoon suite. The room is completely empty. There isn't a single person inside. Surrounded by silence, Om begins thinking about his parents, how they created so many happy memories in this very room. Lost in those emotions, he eventually lies down on the bed and slowly falls asleep. Soon, a vivid dream begins. Om sees a small child, but after looking closely, he realizes the child is actually his younger self. Nearby sits his father's old wooden box. When young Om opens it, he finds a pistol hidden inside. The horrifying truth finally comes to light. The gunshot that killed Om's mother all those years ago wasn't fired by a stranger, it was fired by Om himself. The story he had told everyone about his mother's murder was nothing more than a lie he had convinced himself to believe. The painful memories he had buried for years suddenly come rushing back. After losing his wife, Om's father was completely broken. Unable to cope with the tragedy, he turned to alcohol and slowly destroyed his own life. His addiction eventually claimed him as well, leaving Om completely alone in the world with nothing except guilt and unbearable memories. Just then, Om notices a strange figure dressed in a rabbit costume standing nearby. The unsettling sight terrifies him. Panicking, he runs through the hotel, searching for a way out. He reaches a door and is about to press a nearby button when the manager suddenly appears and urgently stops him. Instead, the manager insists that Om use a different exit. That strange reaction immediately makes Om suspicious. Ignoring the manager's repeated warnings, he presses the original button anyway. To everyone's surprise, it doesn't open a normal door at all. Instead, an old hidden elevator slowly rises from below. As the elevator doors slide open, everyone freezes in shock. Inside lies Fu's lifeless body, still dressed in her Halloween costume. The horrifying discovery confirms that she had been dead all along. The moment the manager realizes the truth is about to come out, panic takes over. Knowing that he's in serious trouble, he quickly traps Om inside the honeymoon suite, locks the door from the outside, and flees the hotel before anyone can stop him. While desperately searching the room for a way to escape, Om notices an old tape recorder lying near the broken glass. It instantly reminds him of the recorder Fu had been carrying. Hoping it contains some clue, he presses play and listens to the final recording she ever made. The recording exposes the horrifying truth. Fu reveals that she was pregnant, and the child's father was none other than the hotel manager. Terrified that his affair would be exposed to his wife, the manager knew he would lose everything. The hotel belonged to his family, and if the truth ever came out, his life would be completely ruined. To silence Fu forever, the manager came up with a cruel plan. One night, he secretly mixed a powerful sedative into her tea. After she lost consciousness, he locked her inside the abandoned honeymoon suite, making sure no one would ever find her. Fu's heartbreaking voice continues playing through the recorder. She explains that after waking up, she desperately tried to escape. She pounded on the door, rang the honeymoon suite bell over and over again, and screamed for help. But because the hotel season had already ended, there was nobody left nearby to hear her cries. Realizing that no one was coming to save her, she recorded one final message, before eventually dying alone inside the room after being trapped there for several days. The movie then cuts to Cherry. He's inside the manager's van after being kidnapped by him. Fortunately, Cherry regains consciousness before it's too late and manages to escape from the vehicle. Back inside the honeymoon suite, Om continues searching desperately for an exit, but every attempt ends in failure. As the isolation begins to consume him, he starts hearing the voices of his parents echoing through the room. His childhood trauma resurfaces, blurring the line between reality and hallucination. He begins seeing terrifying things that aren't actually there. Suddenly, an old television switches on by itself. On the screen appears a horrifying figure wearing a rabbit mask. Speaking in a cold, haunting voice, the mysterious figure begins revealing Om's darkest secret. As a child, Om accidentally shot his own mother while playing with his father's pistol. The tragic story he had told Fu about another child was never about someone else. It had always been about himself. The rabbit-faced figure continues tearing Om apart emotionally. It reminds him that after the accident, his father could never truly forgive him. Consumed by grief and alcoholism, his father slowly destroyed his own life, leaving Om to carry the unbearable guilt alone. Every word pushes Om deeper into despair, forcing him to relive the nightmare he has spent his entire life trying to forget. But this time, Om doesn't let the horrifying visions break him. He finally accepts the truth. None of these voices are real. They're nothing more than the manifestation of the guilt and childhood trauma he has carried for years. Instead of giving in to fear, he forces himself to stay calm and focus on finding a way out. As he carefully searches the honeymoon suite, luck finally seems to be on his side. He discovers an old map of the hotel, and according to it, there's a hidden fire exit connected to the honeymoon suite. The only problem is that the passage can only be reached by going down through the old elevator shaft. Om pulls the elevator up, removes Fu's body from inside with great difficulty, and then uses the elevator to descend into the dark basement below. But the moment he reaches the bottom, he realizes things aren't as simple as he expected. The fire exit has already been sealed shut, and the entire basement feels strangely unsettling, almost as if something evil is hiding in the darkness. To keep himself focused, Om switches on Fu's tape recorder and continues listening to her final recordings. Fu describes the terrifying experiences she had while trapped down there. She says she constantly felt as though someone was watching her from the shadows, someone she could never actually see. As Om listens, he suddenly notices a shadow moving in the darkness. Panic instantly takes over. Convinced that something is really down there with him, he rushes back into the elevator and quickly returns to the upper floor. Just as he steps out of the elevator, he realizes that the terrifying presence wasn't merely his imagination. Whatever was lurking in the basement begins racing upward through the elevator shaft, closing the distance with frightening speed. Om immediately remembers Fu's warning from earlier. If the witch ever comes after you, the only way to survive is to stand inside a circle made of white powder. Without wasting a second, Om runs back into the honeymoon suite, finds the white powder, and hurriedly creates a protective circle around himself. Moments later, the terrifying witch finally appears. She circles around him again and again, searching for a way to attack. But no matter how close she gets, she cannot cross the white boundary. Om is terrified, yet he refuses to move. He knows that the instant he steps outside the circle, the witch will kill him. Meanwhile, Cherry has managed to escape from the manager's van despite being badly injured. Fighting through the pain, he makes his way back toward the hotel. He knows Om is still trapped inside, and no matter what it takes, he's determined to get him out alive before it's too late. By now, dawn is slowly beginning to break. As the hotel manager is leaving the property, he suddenly spots Cherry standing nearby. The sight instantly terrifies him. Cherry knows too much, and if he starts talking, every secret the manager has been hiding will come crashing down. Trying to manipulate the situation, the manager tells Cherry that the police are searching for him and that staying here is dangerous. He offers to help him escape, urging Cherry to come along immediately. Suspicious, Cherry asks about Om. Without hesitation, the manager lies, claiming that Om has already left the hotel in a taxi. Cherry doesn't believe a single word. Determined to find Om himself, he tries to enter the hotel, but the manager forcefully drags him away before he can get inside. At that very moment, Om, still trapped inside the honeymoon suite, realizes someone is outside. Desperately searching for a way to get their attention, he repeatedly rings the old honeymoon suite bell. At first, Cherry doesn't notice the sound, but after walking a short distance, something doesn't feel right. He stops, listens carefully, and finally hears the bell echoing through the silent hotel. Realizing that Om is still trapped inside, Cherry immediately rushes back into the building and runs straight to the honeymoon suite. The moment Cherry unlocks the door, Om quickly reveals the shocking truth. He tells Cherry that Fu wasn't kidnapped or missing, she was murdered, and the person responsible is none other than the hotel manager himself. Before Om can say anything else, a crossbow bolt suddenly flies through the air and strikes Cherry in the head. He collapses instantly. Standing behind him is the real killer, the hotel manager. He knows the truth can never be allowed to reach the outside world. With Cherry's death, the manager has now committed yet another murder to protect his secret. Realizing there's no turning back anymore, the manager makes one final decision. He sets the entire hotel on fire, hoping the flames will destroy every piece of evidence once and for all. As the fire rapidly spreads through the building, Ohm escapes by taking the elevator back down into the basement. But the manager quickly realizes a new problem. If Ohm survives, he'll expose everything, including the murders and the arson. There can be no witnesses. So he follows Ohm into the basement, determined to finish him off himself. Deep underground, Ohm is already on edge. The terrifying presence of the witch can once again be felt nearby. Remembering Fu's warning, he hurriedly creates another protective circle with the white powder before the manager reaches him. Just then, something supernatural happens. The witch suddenly appears behind the manager. She snatches the keys from his hands and throws them far out of reach. Before the manager can even react, massive iron chains emerge from the darkness and wrap tightly around his body. In an instant, he is completely restrained, helpless before the very evil he refused to believe in. The witch begins dragging the helpless manager away, exactly as the old legend described at the beginning of the movie. According to the story, anyone captured by her would be chained up and dragged straight toward the gates of hell. And now, Ohm is witnessing that horrifying legend unfold right before his eyes. Frozen in fear, Ohm watches as the witch pulls the screaming manager deeper into the darkness. The terrifying sight completely breaks him. Overwhelmed by everything that has happened, he falls to his knees and starts crying. In that lonely and hopeless moment, he suddenly feels a familiar presence beside him. It's his mother's spirit. Without wasting another second, Ohm breaks down in front of her. Through tears, he apologizes for the tragedy that changed both of their lives forever. He tells her that what happened that day was never intentional. He never meant to shoot her. It was nothing more than a terrible accident while playing with his father's pistol. His mother gently embraces him and comforts him. She tells him that she has always known the truth, that her son never wanted to kill her. She urges him to stop blaming himself because carrying that guilt won't change the past. Instead, she encourages him to fight for his life and escape while he still has the chance. Inspired by his mother's words, Ohm gathers the courage to move. He steps outside the protective white circle, knowing the witch could attack him at any moment. As expected, the witch immediately lunges toward him with her chains. But instead of chasing Ohm, she turns her attention back to the manager, continuing to drag him toward the darkness. Seizing the opportunity, Ohm quickly uses the knife Fu had given him to free himself and escape. He races back upstairs, desperate to get out of the burning hotel before it's too late. But the thick smoke rapidly fills the building, making it impossible to breathe. Within moments, Ohm loses consciousness and collapses to the floor. Just when it seems all hope is lost, someone rushes into the flames and pulls him to safety. The person who rescues him is none other than the quiet hotel attendant, the same aspiring writer whom Ohm had repeatedly insulted and dismissed throughout the movie. The story then jumps forward several weeks. Ohm wakes up in a hospital bed and finds that very same attendant sitting beside him. It was he who risked his own life to save Ohm from the burning hotel. But then, the movie delivers its biggest twist. Everything we've watched until now, the witch, the supernatural events, the horrifying visions, and everything Ohm believed he experienced, never actually happened in reality. It was all taking place inside Ohm's mind. The attendant finally explains what really happened. He admits that after Ohm insulted and humiliated him that day, he became deeply hurt and furious. Wanting Ohm to experience the emotions described in his own script, he secretly mixed the same mushroom powder into Ohm's tea, the hallucinogenic powder Cherry had mentioned earlier. Its effects were powerful enough to make a person see and experience things that didn't actually exist. Ohm struggles to believe the explanation at first, but as he thinks back, every strange event starts making sense. Then he notices something disturbing. Faint marks of chains are still visible on his own wrists. Strangely, nobody else can see them. Only Ohm can. Whether they are simply the lingering effects of the hallucination or something far more supernatural, the movie leaves that question unanswered. Realizing how unfairly he treated the attendant, Om sincerely apologizes. The attendant smiles and says he only wanted one thing in return, for Om to finally read the script he had written. This time, Om doesn't reject him or mock him. Instead, he respectfully accepts the manuscript. Before leaving, the attendant also returns the photograph of Om's mother, allowing him to hold on to the last precious memory of her. Having finally accepted the truth about his past, Om sits down to write once again. But this time, he decides to rewrite the ending of the very story Fu had previously rejected. Instead of repeating the tragic conclusion, he chooses to give his characters hope. The movie returns to the opening desert sequence one final time. Once again, the man places the bottle on top of the child's head. But this time, everything changes. Before the man can strike, the child gently stops him and says, "Please don't do this. I don't want you to hurt yourself because of me." The child throws the bottle aside and embraces his master, revealing the deep love and loyalty he has always felt toward him. The camera slowly shifts toward the discarded bottle lying on the ground. Beside it rests the skull of a goat, silently suggesting that the two travelers now have another way to break the bottle. This means they won't die in the desert after all. They'll survive, retrieve the map, and finally reach their destination. By changing the fate of those characters, Om symbolically changes his own as well. He no longer chooses despair. He chooses forgiveness, hope, and a future beyond his guilt. And with that powerful message, the movie comes to an emotional end.